US President Joe Biden says a man who killed at least 15 people when he drove into a crowd in New Orleans posted videos to social media before the attack expressing a desire to kill. President Biden described the attack as despicable. The suspect, identified as a 42-year-old US Army veteran, was killed in a shootout with police. A flag of the so-called Islamic State was found in the pickup truck he was driving.
New Orleans is in shock and disbelief. Gathering in silence at the crime scene, many recall running for cover as a truck plowed into the crowds in the French Quarter.
And you just heard this squeal and like the rev when it ended, and then this huge loud impact, and then the people screaming. And debris, just metal, the sound of crunching metal and bodies.
A good friend of mine actually passed away from getting hit by it. And you know the little divots in the wall just like this? So this is what a lot of people jumped into to get away from the truck.
The popular tourist district was full of New Year's revelers at the time of the attack. At least 15 people died and dozens were injured. The driver was a US Army veteran and died at the scene in a shootout with police. The FBI says they recovered the black banner of the so-called Islamic State from the truck. US President Joe Biden said the man had expressed a desire to kill.
The FBI also reported to me that mere hours before the attack, he posted videos on social media indicating that he was inspired by ISIS, expressing a desire to kill, The ISIS flag was found in his vehicle, which he rented to conduct this attack. Possible explosives were found in the vehicle as well, and more explosives were found nearby.
The Islamic State has not claimed responsibility for the attack, raising one of many questions that stunned residents of New Orleans want answered.
Well, our reporter Stefan Ziemons is in New Orleans, and I asked him what was known about the victims.
Well, not much. There's not many details released yet by the authorities about the victims. We know 15 dead, we know dozens injured, many of them severely injured. So authorities actually think that the death toll might go up again from 15 to whatever number. The people who got hurt were, for example, from Israel, from Mexico, young people, revelers at New Year's Eve in the New Year's Day night, and some fun-loving dads who were with their teenagers here in the French Quarter or with their young adults. But details in terms of names, etc., we don't have those yet. However, you can see right behind me, we're like just about 2 blocks away from Canal Street, Bourbon Street, where this suspect took his truck into the Bourbon Street to mow over people and then start a shootout with police. Because, of course, everything here is widely now cordoned off by police because this is still a very, very active scene, a very active investigation. So there's still police activity here around in the French Quarter. And again, victims, let's hope that there are not more people pass about from their injuries caused by this attack.
We heard the president talking about the suspect's desire to kill. What else is being said about a motive?
Yeah, that's a point of speculation still a little bit. So, yes, apparently he taped some videos of him expressing his will to kill people now while he was driving to the scene here, where he actually then committed this attack, this terror attack. As you know, the FBI is investigating this as a terror attack, not just a one-off from somebody who had nothing else to do. So this is serious. But those videos exist. We haven't seen them. Media hasn't any access to them, but authorities tell us that those videos exist. There is another theory or hint that he might have been in severe financial trouble and couldn't really cope also with his life as a civilian after being a veteran. He left the army in 2020. So there will be more details to come and to report. For now, this is all a little bit fuzzy still.
And a quick word about what's being said about possible accomplices, Stefan.
Yeah, the FBI says he couldn't have done it by himself. So they are looking for suspects, for other people who might have helped him to organize this, to build the IEDs, which were apparently built in an Airbnb, which he apparently rented for just the purpose to build those IEDs and then to plant them somewhere. Again, their authorities are keeping mum a little bit. I think in the next few hours or so, there will be more information even to that, or this will be dropped. Maybe he did it alone. But for now, the working theory is he was not alone. He had help from one or more people. Open investigation, Phil. I'm sorry, I can't go into more of this in more detail.
Thank you for that, Stefan. Stefan Zeman in New Orleans. President Biden has said authorities are looking into any possible connection between the attack in New Orleans and an explosion in Las Vegas outside a hotel owned by President-elect Donald Trump. A Tesla Cybertruck packed with fireworks and fuel canisters blew up outside the building's entrance on Wednesday morning. The driver was killed in the blast and 7 other people suffered minor injuries. The FBI is investigating the incident as a potential terror attack. So 2 terror attacks carried out in the US within hours of each other, both by suspects reported to be US military veterans. I asked security expert Hans-Jakob Schindler from the Counter-extremism project if he thinks this is likely to be coincidental.
Well, I mean, the investigation will show if there's any kind of connection. It could just simply be that we do have a very verifiable terror attack in New Orleans on our hands, and then a suicide attempt of an Army veteran in Las Vegas. So it's not necessarily connected, but it's very clear that, of course, not only in Europe do we see heightened activities of terrorists in the last year, but also in the US. There were several attempts of the Islamic State and its sympathizers to pull off an attack even before the last presidential elections.
So can you give us an insight into how investigators are likely to go about building up a picture of how these 2 incidents came about, who they'll speak to, how they'll investigate the suspect lives?
Look, I mean, you have to start with what you know. So they have identified the suspects in both cases. They are now going, of course, through their social media profiles. Again, as in Magdeburg, we've not seen any warnings from social media companies about these individuals which are about to conduct an attack, although they must have had data that points in that direction. For example, the way that the suspect in the New Orleans attack flew the ISIS flag from the back of the truck is a classic mimic of an ISIS propaganda picture from 2017 about vehicle attacks. Then you talk to next of kin, if there are any available, to see whether there is a wider network. Now, for New Orleans, because of multiple IEDs in the car, as well as another one planted on Canal Street, it is clear that the likelihood that he acted alone is very, very low. In the Las Vegas attack, there is no indication that there was anyone else involved in that explosion of that vehicle but the driver himself.
Right. You mentioned a potential mimic there. You said a mimic of what we've seen before. We have this flag of the so-called Islamic State in the New Orleans attack, but no claim of responsibility from IS. So what do you think we should make from that?
Well, this may be a little bit of good news. If this is an ISIS organized attack, like Russia in March last year with the theater, or a ISIS guided attack, i.e. an attack that was prepared in cooperation with ISIS terror professionals in Syria or in Afghanistan via the internet, then you would have a immediate or very shortly after the fact happening claiming of responsibility from ISIS. And this has not happened yet. And we are now more than 24 hours after the attack, which means it's very likely in New Orleans, at least a inspired attack, which means you have the attacker, you may have possible supporters and sympathizers for this particular attack, but you do not have a wider ISIS network that is involved in this attack. For Las Vegas, no one claimed any responsibilities either. So if the US authorities are lucky, these are incidents of inspired terrorists, which are extremely tragic, in particular in the case of New Orleans, but luckily do not point yet to a wider network of ISIS activity in the country.
And a quick word then about the size of the threat that the so-called Islamic State poses to the United States.
It's been clearly rising. The main reason for this is that in all of the core areas in which ISIS is operating and growing, international military pressure has significantly reduced. Since 2021 in Afghanistan, since 2022 in West Africa, since we will see a couple of weeks ago in Syria with the fall of the Assad regime, in these core areas, ISIS is no longer under the same pressure than it used to be a couple of years ago, which means the organization is going back to its priority list. And unfortunately, attacks in the West, in particular in the United States and in Europe, is very, very high on the priority list of this organization.
Right, good talking to you. Thanks for taking us through that so clearly. Hans-Jakob Schindler from the Counter-extremism Project.
Thank you so much.